The late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw wrote the motto, by being mindful at the moment the object arises, one is sure to discern the true nature. According to the motto, it shows that one should be mindful continuously apart from sleeping hours. Whatever posture one may be in, walking, standing, sitting, lying, whatever object that arises, one should note them without missing, without failing, at the moment the object arises. One should note the presently arising object with sustained mindfulness. When Khanika Samadhi, momentary concentration, becomes strengthened, one comes to discern the true nature. One comes to discern the unique individual characteristic of the object. Among the two types of characteristics, unique individual characteristic and common characteristic, one at first discerns unique individual characteristics, seeing the gross nature, and later on one comes to see even the subtle nature of things. And one also discerns cause and effect. So at this stage, one discerns mind and matter, and one only sees the unique individual characteristics at this stage. So at that stage, the beginning and the end of the object is not obvious to the yogi yet. At that stage, one does not see the beginning and the end of object yet. But as one continues to practice, one starts to see the beginning of the object. At the stage one sees the beginning of the object, one does not see the end of object yet. One only sees the unique characteristic of these objects. When Khanika Samadhi concentration becomes strengthened and gains momentum, one starts to see the beginning and the end of the object. When one sees the beginning and the end of the object, one comes to understand that the objects are arising and passing away, and thus one also comes to discern anicca, impermanent. When yogi comes to discern impermanent, one also discerns lamanya lakkhana, common characteristic which is common to all objects. By discerning the characteristic, one also discerns udaya vaya. Udaya means the beginning and vaya means the end. At first, yogi discerns the unique individual characteristics, and as one continues to practice, one discerns cause and effect, and one starts to see the beginning of the object. And later on, one also sees the end of the object, and thus one sees beginning and the end of object. When one starts to see the beginning and the end of the object, one is said to see the samanya lakkhana, one is said to discern the common characteristics. So one should not deliberately look for it, but these characteristics will be obvious automatically as the yogi is mindful on the presently arising object. Only if one discerns arising and passing away, one discerns anicca, impermanent. So first one has to discern the unique individual characteristic of the object. When one discerns the unique individual characteristic of the object, one also comes to discern the beginning and the end of object. Seeing the beginning and the end of objects, one comes to understand that these objects are impermanent. Being mindful of the objects that are anicca, that are impermanent, one comes to discern the unique individual characteristic, and one also discerns the arising and passing away, and thus it is said that these objects are refusing that they are permanent to the yogi who discerns. When it is said that these objects that have been noted are refusing their permanence, to the yogi who discerns, it implies that these objects are admitting that they are impermanent to the yogi who discerns. So who are making this refusal that they are permanent? They are the anicca Dhamma. They are the Dhamma which are impermanent. So these impermanent objects are refusing that they are permanent. The nama rupa are refusing that they are permanent. So how should the yogi discern in order to happen this way? Yogi should discern by being mindful of these objects. It is not the knowledge gained through theory, it is not the knowledge gained through learning from the teachers, but by being mindful of the object, by discerning the unique characteristic of the object, it is said that these objects are refusing that they are permanent to the yogi who discerns. It also means that these nama rupa, which are the objects that are noted, they are admitting they are impermanent to the yogi who discerns. And it is said that when the yogi discerns arising and passing away of the object, the yogi discerns anicca lakkhana, the characteristic of impermanence. The nama rupa are called anicca, impermanent, because they arise and pass away. When the yogi discerns arising and passing away, beginning and end of objects, yogi discerns Anicca Lakkhana, the characteristic of impermanence. Only if the person discerns the unique individual characteristic of objects, yogi will also discern udaya and vaya, arising and passing away of the object. In order to discern, one should be mindful at the moment the object arises, so that one comes to know the unique individual characteristic of the object. One also comes to know the udaya vaya, arising and passing away, beginning and end of object, and thus yogi also understands that these objects are impermanent. Only when the yogi sees the characteristic of arising and passing away, yogi discerns the characteristic of impermanence. So the knowledge discerning the characteristic of impermanence is called anicca nupassana, and it is also called Vipassana jnana, insight knowledge. In the word Vipassana, Vi means in various ways of impermanent suffering and non-self, and Passana means knowing, discerning. Vipassana means knowing, discerning in various modes of impermanent suffering and non-self of the nama rupa. There are three things yogis should know. Anicca Veditava, yogis should discern anicca. Anicca Lakkhana Veditava, yogis should also discern the characteristic of impermanence. And anicca nupassana Veditava, meaning one should also know anicca nupassana. The nama rupa phenomena arise due to their relevant causes. These nama rupa phenomena are also called Buddha because they really exist. They are arising and they really exist. So these nama rupa phenomena are also called anicca, impermanent. When one is noting the presently arising object, when one is discerning these nama rupa arising, connecting as cause and effect, one discerns anicca, impermanent. By noting the presently arising object, one experiences such as hardness, softness, moisture, congealing, heavy, light, warmth, cold, heat, stiffness, tension, movement. All of these are called Buddha because they are really arising, they are really present, they really exist. These objects arise due to their relevant cause. They are also called jata, as they are born of their cause, and they can be discerned directly, and they really exist. And these objects are also called anicca because they are impermanent. So all these objects, hardness, softness, moisture, congealing, warmth, heat, cold, stiffness, tension, all these objects are anicca, impermanent. Hutva bhavakaro, hutva abhavakaro, anicca lakkhana. Meaning anicca lakkhana is the characteristic of impermanence. As the object arises and passes away, as the object passes away after arising, it is the characteristic of impermanence. It is anicca lakkhana. Sayadaw explained it with an example. Say if there is a dress, and in the dress there are 3 holes. The 3 holes are in the dress. And when one looks at these holes are not in the air, but these 3 holes are in the dress. And if one spreads out the dress, one will see the holes. Dress is not whole, and holes are not dress. They are apart from each other. In the same way, the characteristics, anicca lakkhana, the characteristics of impermanence, is apart from nama rupa. But the characteristics of impermanence are in the nama rupa. Passing away of the object after it has arisen, it is anicca lakkhana, characteristic of impermanence. When one is noting the object, when one sees the object passing away, when noting the object, one comes to discern impermanence. Coming to know the impermanence by seeing the dissolution of the object, when noting the object, it is anicca nupassana. Only when one sees the dissolution of the object, one will develop anicca nupassana. It is not the knowledge from theory, it is not the kind of knowledge gained by learning from teachers, it is not the kind of knowledge by reflecting, but it is the knowledge gained through direct experiential practice. In order to develop anicca nupassana, one should be noting the presently arising object. By noting the object, when the yogi sees the dissolution of the object when noting, one comes to understand that it is impermanent. So one develops anicca nupassana by seeing the dissolution of the object when noting it. So one should note the object with sustained mindfulness so that one sees the dissolution of the object and one will understand the impermanence, seeing the dissolution of the object, and one develops anicca nupassana, contemplation of impermanence, knowledge contemplating of the impermanence, and it is also called Vipassana, insight knowledge. So Sayadaw explains anicca lakkhana, and anicca nupassana, giving an example. When the yogi is noting rising and falling of the abdomen, heat may arise. Heat is anicca, impermanent. Whatever physical or mental phenomena that arise is called anicca, impermanent. So in this example, heat arises, heat is anicca, impermanent. As the yogi notes it as heat, or as the yogi notes it as hot, yogi who is bright will see that heat is not just one, but the heat arises one after another. There are layers and layers of heat, segment by segment of heat. The old heat passes away, new heat arises. Old heat passes away, new heat arises. In this way, yogi sees the heat layer by layer, segment by segment. Yogi also sees the segment and segment of heat arising and passing away when noting the object heat. Noting the object heat, when the yogi sees the dissolution of heat after it has arisen, the dissolution of heat after it has arisen is anicca, Lakkhana, characteristic of impermanence. When noting heat, yogi sees the dissolution of heat, and yogi understands that it is impermanent. Knowledge, understanding the impermanence, when the yogi sees the heat dissolve, when noting this heat, yogi develops anicca nupassana. So this is the example of explaining anicca lakkhana, and anicca nupassana with the example of heat as the object. The same goes with other objects such as coldness, stiffness, tension, movement, and so on. In order to discern anicca, impermanent, one should be mindful of Buddha, the objects that are really arising, that are really present. If it is hot, note it as hot. If it is cold, note it as cold. If it is stiff, note it as stiff. Noting that one is knowing these objects in the way they are. Yatha sabhavato, meaning one knows these objects in the way they are. Noting the object, one will discern the unique individual characteristic and also common characteristic. That's why Yatha sabhavato is defined as Sabhava lakkhanato, samanya lakkhanato. One discerns these objects, discerning the unique individual characteristic as well as common characteristic. By noting the presently arising object, one discerns the object, knowing the unique individual characteristic. As yogis continue to practice, yogi also discerns cause and effect. And when the yogi discerns arising and passing away of the object, the yogi also discerns samanya lakkhana, common characteristic. In order to discern, one should note the object with sustained mindfulness at the time the object arises. So when one discerns the unique individual characteristics and when one discerns common characteristics, what will happen to the yogi's idea about nama and rupa? When one discerns the common characteristics, arising and passing away of the object. When the yogi discerns the characteristic of impermanence, yogi will no longer be attached on the object. One will be free from craving, clinging on the object. And as the yogi continues to practice, yogi will reach the state where it is totally free from all suffering, and yogi attains cessation. Sayadaw gives an example. If a person goes to a shop to buy a dress or a shirt, at first the person sees a nice shirt, a good design, nice design, and also the nice design, and the person comes to like it. As the person sees 3 holes in the dress or in the shirt, the person no longer wants it anymore. Before seeing the 3 holes, the person wanted to buy the shirt or the dress. But after seeing the 3 holes, the person no longer wants it. In the same way, at first, a person is attached on the nama rupa. But as the person practices, by being mindful at the object, by being mindful of the objects that arise, as the yogi sees the arising and passing away, when the yogi sees the characteristic of impermanence, or any characteristic of the 3, anicca lakkhana, dukkha lakkhana, and anatta lakkhana, seeing any one of the 3 characteristics, yogi will not crave onto the nama rupa. Before seeing the 3 characteristics, yogi is attached in it, but after seeing the 3 characteristics, yogi will no longer be attached, yogi will no longer crave. Before one sees the flaws of nama rupa, one is attached with them. Seeing the flaws of nama rupa, one will no longer be attached, one will no longer crave on these. If one discerns anicca, one is also said to discern dukkha and anatta. By being mindful of the object that arises, yogi discerns sabhava lakkhana, unique individual characteristics. As the yogi discerns the unique individual characteristic, later on, yogi also sees the arising and passing away of the object. When the yogi sees arising and passing away of the object, yogi discerns samanya lakkhana, common characteristics. When yogi discerns common characteristics by discerning arising and passing away, yogi develops Vipassana jnana, insight knowledge. Developing insight knowledge, yogi discerns that the object is not permanent. If something is not permanent, it is taken as something that is not good. So yogi also understands that it is dukkha. And the object arises in its own accord, due to its cause. Nobody is creating, nobody is making it to happen. So these things are arising in their own accord, due to the relevant cause. It is not the Mahabrahma that is creating, but these nama-rupa are arising in their own accord. As the yogi discerns impermanence of the nama-rupa, yogi also said to discern dukkha and anatta. So that's why it is said, by discerning anicca, one is also said to be discerning dukkha and anatta. The nama-rupa has the three names, anicca, dukkha and anatta. When it is said anicca, these are the nama-rupa. Dukkha are also nama-rupa. Anatta are also nama-rupa. So nama-rupa has all these three names, anicca, dukkha and anatta. So by discerning anicca, one automatically discerns dukkha and anatta. By discerning anicca lakkhana, the characteristics of impermanence, one is also said to be discerning the other two characteristics. One should be mindful of whatever object that arises at the sixth sense door. One should be mindful every time one sees, hears, smells, tastes, touches, and knows. At the moment one sees, hears, and so on, the nama-rupa are arising in pairs. If one is not mindful at the moment the object arises, one's mind will not be calm or concentrated. When the mind is not calm, concentrated, one will not be developing Vipassana, and one will not discern samanya lakkhana, common characteristic. Not being mindful, one will not even discern unique individual characteristic. Not discerning unique individual characteristic, one will not discern anicca lakkhana, the characteristic of impermanence. Not discerning impermanence, one will take it as permanent. When one sees things as permanent, one will think of them as good, and one will crave on these. Discerning the impermanence, one will no longer take it as good. When one no longer take it as good, it will be dukkha lakkhana, characteristic of dukkha. Only if one sees things as impermanent, only when one sees things as permanent, one will think of them as good and one will crave. Not discerning anicca, not discerning impermanent, it is avijja. Seeing things as permanent, it is also avijja. It is avijja not seeing things as bad, and it is avijja seeing things as good. So in this way, not discerning anicca, one will think of these things as good and one will crave on them. By being mindful of the object, when one discerns unique individual characteristics, common characteristics, one will also discern anicca lakkhana, characteristic of impermanence. Discerning the characteristic of impermanence, one will no longer take these as good, and thus one will also discern dukkha lakkhana, the characteristic of dukkha. So in this way, discerning any one of the three characteristics, one is also said to be discerning the other two. Among the characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self, by discerning the characteristic of impermanence, one also automatically discerns the other two characteristics. So Sayadaw says, only when one sees the true anicca Lakkhana. So when it is said only when one sees the true anicca Lakkhana, it also implies that there are fake anicca Lakkhana. And Sayadaw explains what are the fake anicca Lakkhana. For example, when one sees a glass brick or one tree, it is anicca, impermanent. So this kind of thing, when one says it is impermanent, seeing the glass brick, it is a fake anicca Lakkhana. And also when one is pricked by something, it will bring pain. And when one experiences the pain, one will say, oh, dukkha. So saying dukkha when there is pain, without any practice, it is fake dukkha Lakkhana. So what one contemplates just by theory, without any practice, it will be fake characteristic of anicca or dukkha. And at times one contemplates nama rupa is anicca, nama rupa is dukkha, nama rupa is anatta, reciting, mere recitation, without any practice. It is paññatti anicca, paññatti dukkha. One is contemplating the characteristic of impermanent suffering just as a concept, not through practice. So Sayadaw says, without any practice, just by mere recitation, just by mere contemplation of impermanence and suffering, when the glass breaks or when there is pain, then these are the fake anicca Lakkhana, fake dukkha Lakkhana. In order to discern the true anicca Lakkhana, one needs to be mindful of presently arising object. By being mindful of presently arising object, when one discerns the unique individual characteristic, when one discerns the common characteristic, by discerning arising and passing away, one will understand through the direct experiential knowledge that things are impermanent, and one discerns the characteristic of impermanence. In order to gain such kind of knowledge, one needs to know the object at the moment the object arises, so that one discerns the characteristics, one discerns arising, passing away, and one discerns the true characteristics of impermanent suffering and non-self. Such person is said to be a person who has knowledge eye. A person who has knowledge eye will see things in the way they really are. As Sayadaw will continue to explain the next day. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.